is Dennisa. Most of you know me. And thank you to the people who are joining us by Zoom. Welcome, everybody. Now, this is part of the series of workshops that we've been doing on neuroscience. The idea is if we can learn the fundamental concepts of how our brain adapts to our experiences and how it functions, then we can actually offset a lot of problems later on in life. And not just offset, we can also start to repair the things that have happened before and move forward into a better life. So my passion was to bring this into public knowledge, because when we do that, then we can actually see well-being improve in the population. So that's the idea. We are doing a seminar on stress. We would like to acknowledge the big amount of stress that some people in New Zealand have been through, particularly people who have been affected by Cyclone Gabrielle in Hawke's Bay and also in Auckland. This is the fourth part of a series of 6. And both of us will be talking. Yuvraj is my husband. He has been, in his previous life, a cardiac surgeon and a general surgeon, so I thought he can talk to us about the body and the brain. Plus, he's also training in the neurosequential model. Wouldn't it be lovely if this was the picture of life every day, all day? It would be so good, beautiful. You know what really pulls me to this picture? You see ducklings in a group. They're relational. They're swimming. They're in beautiful surroundings. Yeah, they're doing a calming movement activity. Sensations, movement, relationship. Perfect combination for de-stressing. This is a picture that one of my patients drew. He's a 9-year-old. Come in. Be here. This was drawn by a 9-year-old young boy who had been through bereavement and a lot of other stuff as well. We were doing EMDR therapy, and this was I think the second session. He drew lines and he wrote down these words: "It's too hard. I give up." All these lines were codes. There are so many codes I have to solve. And then he took out 2 codes. He solved 2, but there was a lot more. And he was writing, "I can't do this." That's kind of how stress affects us. We feel it. We experience it. It's not just our thoughts. It's not only in the top of our head. It is in our brain, and our brain controls our body, so it lives in our body. This boy recovered, but what we are going to do is understand how we can get into these situations and talk about all these things around stress today. So what is stress? You know, people use big words. We often say things like trauma. We say, for some people, trauma might mean something big happening, like being in a car accident, or being in war, or being in maybe sexual assault. Yes, it is trauma. But what we got to recognize is that everyday experiences can also wear us out. And that is also trauma. So it's a big thing. Sometimes people feel using the word stress is minimalizing it. But actually, no, it's one of the most powerful things that a human being can experience. And it's one of the most powerful things that affects both our brain and our body. It is the underlying denominator in a wide number of mental and physical health issues, as we will see. So stress, for me, it's, we have, as human beings, a safety survival system. Or you could call it a safety survival system, safety stress system. Anything that causes the system to respond and changes its function is a stress. So this is an article that talks about stress. There's lots of articles that are coming up now. Now there is a lot of emerging studies, research, and evidence that couldn't even have been thought about 20 years ago. And what we now understand about the brain is that the type of experiences we go through, the timing that it happened in our lives, and the severity, all those inform how our brain is impacted by those experiences. You know, in our own lives, we would all have been through stress. None of us can say that we haven't experienced stress, but it doesn't affect us the same way all the time. And there are major events that happen. It does not affect everybody the same. You know, people are affected differently. And why is that? This will give some clue. Positive stress, and we've heard many people talk about, we have to learn how to get on, only then can we move forward. Well, what they're talking about is positive stress. Positive stress is dose limited. Dose limited, and it is buffered by relational connections. Relational connections are the most powerful things in life that buffer stress. And stress happens when there is a gap between anything that we are going through and the buffers that we have to get through that experience. So, for example, there might be a little baby who just has a wet nappy. Now, how many of us would think that can be a major trauma for anyone? It's an everyday thing, right? But say the nappy is wet and the baby is crying. And for some reason, the caregiver is unable to attend multiple times. It's an experience that keeps happening over and over. Yeah. And there could be multiple reasons for that. Maybe the mom is physically unwell or mentally not in a good space, or maybe just not in the room and working from some other room. But if this baby keeps on going through that wet nappy, it's going to change how this baby's brain is going to respond and function. For that brain, I'm in distress. I need to escape my distress. There is no one here to help me. And that is something we want to avoid. So any stress, it can be big or small. It doesn't depend on the intensity of the stress. But any stress, if it is buffered, then it becomes a positive stress. And the important thing is the dosing is limited, time limited and quantity limited. Tolerable stress is a big, massive event. It happens and you can't control it, but you've got enough relational buffers. So we went through Cyclone Gabrielle. We will be seeing in the next few months and years that people are affected differently. Some people may have had good buffers, so the impact on them may have been lesser. But some people may not have had the buffers they needed in that period of time in their life to get through the Cyclone Gabrielle. Some people may have had enough buffers for life at that time, but they may also have had enough other things happening in their life. And when this came, it might have overwhelmed them. But then life settles down, and then their supports come back together. So that becomes tolerable. It goes beyond your buffering, and then it settles down, and then you're buffered again. So it makes it a tolerable stress. Toxic stress is the most important for us to know. Toxic stress is when the brain is unprepared for that level of overload, and it is for a prolonged period of time with consistent inadequate buffering. So when it's a long road like this, it changes for the longer term the architecture of the brain. And that is what sensitizes us in the longer term. One of the other things we know is that at periods of rapid brain development, the impact is more rapid. The most rapid period of brain development is during pregnancy. And very often we do not even get a history what happened in mom's life when she was pregnant with you. So you see, from a single cell organism, we are born as an infant with 100 billion neurons. And as adults, it's cut down a bit. And then we have 86 billion neurons. It's not million, it's billion. So that period of development is critical. And then the first 3 months, the first year, and then the first 2 years. So if there was something happening in the family, or if the child was unwell and maybe was in ICU, parents could have been very loving parents, but they were simply not able to be present there and do for the child what needed to be done. Plus, there were other things, there'll be monitors and stuff, everything that is regulating for a child. So all those things can cause toxic stress. But what I usually see in my clinical practice is some people have gone through early experiences like that for some reason, and then they've gone on well in life for a period of time, because they're having good relational buffers. There has been a lot of activities they've been doing, music, sports, that held them through, that regulated their brain. But there might have come a time in adolescence when things fall apart because something big happened. That's a phenomenon I've been seeing quite a bit with COVID. The kids who have been in ICU or who had something happen early on and then were doing very well. Suddenly with COVID and the lockdowns, there are many of them who are coming for help. So that's something we need to keep in mind because it makes us vulnerable. This is kind of what I was talking about when I was talking about positive and tolerable. Big things can happen, but really depends. And also little things that erode. This is just as important, if not more, than a massive thing. Imagine this happening to a house which is already eroded. It's going to be much harder to build. I'm not a builder, and I had to figure out how to explain what happens to the brain when the foundation is affected. The foundation of the brain is during pregnancy and the first few months. When the foundation of a house is affected, later on, you can see it as cracks in the wall. You can see it as the problems in the window, problems in flooring. And then we might be wondering, where is that coming from? Now, what we could do is try to just fix the window, try to just fix the flooring. And what will happen? It keeps coming. What do we need to do? We need to fix the foundation. It's a tougher job. Yeah. So that's the importance of getting the foundation right. Sometimes it might be a leaky roof. And we had a leaky roof with Cyclone Gabrielle. I don't know how many others had. But then all we had to do was clean the gutters, and there may be a couple of broken tiles. When that is clear, it's much quicker work. It's much simpler work. And then the problem is fixed, so to speak. So when we translate this to human beings, there will be some people who were fortunate enough to have healthy pregnancy periods when they were in their mother's womb, healthy early years. And then something big happened, and then it was easier for them to get through it because the foundations were already there. And then we sometimes compare with other children or other people similar age and say, well, he got through it or she got through it. Why can't you? Well, you got to go back and look at what was their foundation. And no two people are similar, not even siblings, not even twins. No two people are similar. We are all unique. And we're all different. The other type of trauma, stress, which we can overlook with the internet age, this is something we need to be really mindful of. What we view. How many of us would say that we felt the pain and the suffering of people who are affected by the floods when we ourselves didn't go through? When we see the TV, when we hear the news, when somebody tells us what happened to them? That's vicarious trauma. Usually it is very common in first responders because they're seeing it all the time. But these days, it is common for more people as well. And then watching horror movies. For me, what I found is it goes back to the life stage. I do have people coming with quite a lot of anxiety, sometimes OCD, and um, the whole fight, flight, and freeze response, dissociation response. And when I go back into the history, there may have been little things, but quite often I watched a movie about a clown. And then a few days later, I watched a movie about dragons swallowing people. And I was like 7 years old when I did that. It stayed with me. You know why? Because when you're 7, your brain's way of interpretation is very different. You have thinking that is more concrete and that is more self-oriented. You are the center of your universe. So if you're 7 years old and you're watching very scary movies, you're probably going to put yourself into the character. And then you're going to absorb it and take it with you. So that's another important thing to keep in mind when we talk about stress and trauma. That is exactly why I have, in my practice, started to move a little bit away from strictly classifying trauma, saying this is trauma, this is not. Anything that has a negative experience on a person's psyche will be something that needs to be looked into and addressed. It has been traumatic for that particular person, that's true. Well, it is possible to repair what has happened before, whether it was in the foundation stage or whether it was in the roofing stage. The techniques and methods are going to be different. The time taken to repair is going to be different. The scale of the job is going to be different, but it is possible. That is why we're here. It is not all gloom and doom. Now, how stress affects our body? I'm going to hand over to Yuvraj for that.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to run through a few slides here about how stress affects the body. Essentially, I'm going to be talking about three things. One is the neurosequential model of the brain, how stress manifests in the body. It's primarily through two things. One is the autonomic nervous system, and other one is the HPA axis. Dennisa will be talking about the HPA axis. Now, the thing with the neurosequential model is it's a beautiful model because the brain is so complex. There's this renowned psychiatrist from the United States called Bruce Perry. He's simplified it, literally oversimplified it into a model, which is really easy to understand. And that will help us think about the brain very differently from the point of how the brain develops. And also what happens at each stage and how stress at different stages of development and what it does to the brain and how that could manifest much later. That helps us understand what we are going through now and go back and think, oh, that's happened to me, and sort of figure things around. So that's what we do now. Now this is the model of the brain, like I said, very simplistic and neurosequential. The essence is neuro, the brain, develops sequentially. It develops from the bottom up, and two, it develops from the inside out sequentially. So that's the basic concept. So if we remove that, it'll be excellent. So the bottommost part is called the brainstem. So that is the first thing to develop. When I say first thing to develop, it doesn't mean that that's the only part developing, but that's the part that develops the most. And this happens inside the mother's womb. So, and this part controls the very basic functions of life, which is heartbeat, your respiration, your temperature regulation, and so on. So that develops, that's the very first thing to develop, and that happens intrauterine. And now the next part is the cerebellum. That's one level up. So it's good to remember these colors and how they look, because later on in the talk as well, Dennisa is going to use that and reference that. Some of you who's attended this talk before will probably already have seen this, but it's a good refresher. Now, the next part is the cerebellum. Now, with the cerebellum, that develops most after the baby is born, the first few months. So that's responsible for motor functions, movement, and so on. It's also responsible for, arousal and things like that. Now, the next part that develops is the limbic system, slightly older age group, still in children, slightly older age group, which is responsible for emotions, more responsible for sexual behavior, And then finally comes the cortex. The cortex is the topmost part of the brain, which sets us apart from the other species. That helps us think, helps us reason, logic, music, complex mathematics, and so on. That's what functions from the top part. And like I said, it's not segregated like this. They're all interconnected, one with the other. And there are a whole lot of neurons that connect all these parts of the brain. And they communicate with each other with a lot of chemicals. And some of the main chemicals are dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin. Apart from that, there are a lot of other chemicals that help communicate with each other. Now, with that background, so this is essentially what I said. When the child is in utero, the main part that develops is the brainstem. That's at the bottom. And it helps with the primary physiological functions, which is heart rate, respiration, temperature regulation. And then the next one is going upwards, the cerebellum, limbic system, and the cortex, and the various functions that they're responsible for. Now, this is the next bit I was talking to you about. The brain develops sequentially from inside out. Now, what that means is when the baby is inside the mother's womb, it's the brainstem that develops, right? Of the total development of the brainstem, most of the development happens at that time, right? Other parts also develop, but out of the total, only part of it develops. And also, that's what happens. So I just want to go through a little bit more with the slide. The first one, the top left slide, which is talking about the intrauterine life. Now, if you see, the only connection that the baby has is with the mother. And that's when the brainstem develops. Suppose the mother goes through some stress, that is translated to the baby. So suppose, imagine the mother, the extreme case like drug and alcohol, or family violence, or small stuff like they move to a new place. The mother doesn't have support, or it's an unplanned pregnancy. All these things cause stress in the mother, and that stress is transferred to the baby, the developing fetus. And that affects the brainstem development. And in turn, that affects the heart rate regulation, the blood pressure regulation, the temperature regulation. So much later in life, suppose someone's 25 or 30 or in their teens, these kids' brain is not equipped well enough to cope with their temperature or their heart rate. So you find these people with a heart rate of 120, whereas they're supposed to have a heart rate of 70 or 80 or whatever. Or they're sweating when it's cold, or they're feeling very cold when it's warm. So that's because, going back to the development, they've gone through stress. Now, the next bit is birth to 1 year. Now here, the main area of development is the cerebellum and the diencephalon. Now here, if you see, it is the baby and the mother again. And also, there are other people around the baby. Just imagine if, suppose the mother has to go back to her work, or money is too short, or some stress like that. Or the mother can't give enough time because she's got other children to care for, right? Some stress like that, that is going to affect the baby. And that's going to affect, the motor function, the temperature regulation, and so on. Now, the good thing is there are other people who can be involved. If suppose how to combat this is, a caring nana, or, a good nanny, things like that. All that the baby needs is a strong figure. Like Dennisa was saying, baby's got a wet nappy. The baby assumes that that's a problem. The baby says, if the brain says it's uncomfortable, and the mother comes and changes the wet nappy, or the nana comes and changes the wet nappy, and then smiles at the baby. The baby's brain is saying, I wasn't distressed. Now I'm free of distress. I'm happy. My nana did something and she smiled. So the baby associates that beautifully to a positive input. So the stress that is caused by the wet nappy does not cause a problem because it's buffered by the good thing that has happened. Now, the next one is 1 to 3 years of age. That's when the limbic system develops. Now here we have other people involved, family, friends, and then slightly older age group on the left lower bit is 3 to 10 years. That's when they go to school, and in school their peers, they can go through bullying, and all that they need is a supportive peer who looks out for them, a teacher, a youth group leader, a football club coach. Now, all these people can cause positive influences. Now, the next one, we'll just run through the autonomic nervous system. And stress affects the body in two primary ways. One is through manifestations of the autonomic nervous system. Another one is through the HPA axis. Now, you probably already know this. There are three different branches of the nervous system. The first one is the central nervous system. That's the brain and all the connections that we talked about. The second one is the peripheral nervous system, which is the spinal cord, all the nerves that goes to your muscles, your sensations, your movements, and all that. And then you have the autonomic nervous system. I like to call this the automatic nervous system because this is not voluntary. This is a nervous system that responds to stress in the body, not necessarily toxic stress, not necessarily stress from the environment, like emotions and so on. It's just even changes in the body, and it responds to that change automatically through chemical mediators. Now, there are two main parts to the autonomic nervous system. One is the sympathetic, that's to the left of the screen, and the other is the parasympathetic. These are nerves that come either from the spinal cord or from the brainstem, and they join together, and they supply almost every part of the body. And both of them, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, they are like opposites. They function in two entirely different ways. Right? The sympathetic nervous system, if you want to remember that easily, it is the flight and fight response. It sets you up to combat a threat through the fight and flight response. Now, the parasympathetic system is just the opposite. It is rest and digest. It's just the chill nervous system. So as soon as a body senses a trigger, like just imagine there is a loud noise and a body thinks, oh, that's a threat. That's a problem. It goes through stress. The sympathetic nervous system comes into play and body gets ready to fight and flight. And then the body realizes, oh no, that's actually just a loud noise. And then the parasympathetic nervous system comes into play and it calms your body down. And this happens to and fro all the time. In fact, there is variations in your heartbeat, even with breathing. You take a deep breath, the heartbeat goes up. You breathe out, it comes down. It just keeps changing. It happens all the time. Now, the switch between the seesaw effect, as long as it keeps happening often, it's good because your body is coping with every stress that comes across, right? Not every, most of the stresses it comes across. But if that switch doesn't happen to and fro, and your body is always in the fight and flight response, that means your body is not coping with the stress, it's reacting to the stress. So that is something to understand. So different organs of the body adapt differently. Now, if you just go with the heartbeat, now the heartbeat, it's beautiful actually, if you think of it. I won't go into that now. The upper chambers of the heart, there's a place which triggers automatically the heartbeat. That's actually supposed to trigger at 100 to 120 or somewhere in that range. But actually, it's the parasympathetic nervous system which sort of puts a brake. That's why your heart rate is much lower. And then when you go through stress, the heartbeat goes up. And then the parasympathetic nervous system comes and puts a brake. So that seesawing effect is there. So with that in the background, I will hand over back to Dennisa to take us from. Oh yeah, just one more slide. So essentially, yeah, this is actually the topic, how stress affects the body, and I forgot about that. Essentially, long-term stress can affect any part of the body. So if you think of the brain, the head, headaches, brain fog, then you come to the eyes, you come to the ears, tinnitus, and then skin, seborrheic dermatitis that gets exacerbated by stress, then mouth ulcers, nose, asthma, allergic rhinitis get precipitated by stress, your lungs, asthma, and then your stomach, diarrhea, constipation, sometimes are precipitated by stress. Again, going back to the infancy, children who are supposed to have been toilet trained are not toilet trained because they've gone through some stress. Now, like that, stress can affect, and of course, mental health. Now, just one word of caution. If people have any of these symptoms, as a general rule, before we attribute that to stress, we should rule out physical causes. Because if someone's got constipation or diarrhea, before we say, oh, this is stress, we should make sure that physical causes should be ruled out.
Thank you. So now that we know stress affects just about every part of our being, our brain and our body, how I like to think about it is it's a motherboard of the laptop. Anything that's wrong with the motherboard is going to show up everywhere in the laptop. So this is what we commonly hear about when we talk about the mechanisms of stress. There is a lot more also. This is the HPA axis, that is the hypothalamus, pituitary, both of which are in our head, in the middle, lower part of our heads, and the adrenal axis. Your adrenals sit on top of your kidneys. They secrete adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, the main hormones that take us into fight and flight. Now, the freeze collapse and another mechanism called dissociation, where we respond to stress, that's driven by different sets of neurochemicals. So when we look at this, this is very quickly triggered by any threatening or novel experience. Any novel experience has to be first classified by the brain, whether it is safe or not. And until it is classified as safe, it will be categorized as potential threat. And the response will be as if it is a potential threat. Now, this is something that's really important to know. The nurture that we have early in life literally changes our genes and our stress response. So this is a study of rat pups that were licked by the mother and not licked. The pups that were licked by the mother had a much more modulated stress response later in life because of how the glucocorticoid receptors were expressed by that process. Now we're going to go into more pathways in the brain. Like I was saying, we have 86 billion neurons, and they're all very interconnected. They do not work in silos. So it's not just the HPA axis that is affected by any threat or stress, but there are other parts of our brain. When we look at the overall brain, we can classify it as the top brain and the bottom brain. Now, if you think about the top brain, that's where your cortex and your prefrontal cortex, that is the folded in part of your top brain, which is very unique to human beings. That is the thinking, creative, rationalizing, logical part of your top brain, the self-reflecting part of your top brain. All those places in the top, they are like the brakes of a car. Now, the brakes are yet in formation till we are well into our 20s. It is the lower brain that is formed first. So the lower brain is like the accelerator. And to function in synchrony, in regulation, we need synchronous function of both parts of the brain. You can't be well functioning if you have an accelerator that is too strong and overriding the brakes, or a brake that's too light. This is another network that's really important to know. This is new information in the last 10 years or so. It's called the default mode network. Now, this is parts of the brain like a mohawk, the in-between and lower parts of the brain. These parts of the brain are meant to light up and become active when we are resting, when we are idle. So when we are in those states and these parts light up, they help us to have a sense of ourselves, how my body feels, who am I connect with our environment, dream of our future. The many parts here, the part in front, that is the part that is connecting, motivating, helping us to dream. And these parts are self-reflecting. For the people on Zoom, yeah, the ones in the front and then the regions behind. Now, this is a study that's come out not too long ago. And this is functional MRI scans that were taken in people who met criteria for PTSD. You see, when you research, you have to make sure that you're meeting criteria so that you can tick boxes and quantify things. Now, to translate it to everyday life, what I would say is people who have been in prolonged states of stress and responded with what they studied, that is dissociation. Dissociation is a state when you feel you are there, but you're not there. You can feel empty. You can feel spaced out. You can miss parts of conversations. You may not remember some parts of your day. You may read, but then after you read through the whole page, you may find, when you look at it again, wow, where did that come from? That's new. That's spacing out. Sometimes in extreme states, people can feel disembodied, So that is dissociation. They took people who met the criteria for PTSD and had dissociation, and they did functional MRI scans. What they found in the scan is very interesting. They found that for controls, if you see, the red parts that light up, that is a default mode network, they light up at rest. But if you see for PTSD, under PTSD, those are off. What does that mean? It's really hard to rest. Rest is painful. Rest is not restful. And then if you see under controls, when exposed to threat, those parts switch off because your body is focusing on what it has to do and get through it. But then those parts switch on when people have a dissociated response. So it's very interesting to see how it's the opposite. That means that for people who have a dissociative response in the brain, resting stage can be hard. So they may be putting themselves at risk in many ways to cope, to feel, to not feel numb, to not feel empty, to feel something, to feel myself. Adaptatively, we may be taking on a lot of workload. Workaholics. I mean, it doesn't explain all workaholics, but that might be one of the ways we adapt. Just take on a lot, have lots of deadlines. So we are switching on our default mode network, motivating ourselves. We may be taking up adventure sports or risky jobs, and that might be another way to cope. But then people who are vulnerable are people who have gone through traumatic stress and disconnection, who have not had anybody to show them or take them through to an adaptive stress response, and they get into trouble. When we see news and see all the talk about ram raids and kids getting into trouble, this is one thing we've got to keep in mind. This would be a vulnerable group of people who can be easily recruited into trouble. Now, this is another study that shows how our brain works very differently when we are going through prolonged stress and when we are not. You see, in the first picture of the brain, it says left anterior cingulate in the unexposed. You see a lot of activity coming from the green part. That green part, to depict your anterior cingulate, what it's doing is it's actually taking the information coming to you from the world, and then it's sifting it out. It's blocking the stuff you do not need and taking in only what you need. So when it does that, whatever information is thrown at you, you're not going to be overwhelmed by it. And so you can contain it. And then the self-referential parts, the self-sensing parts of your brain which is shown here at the right anterior insula and the right precuneus. Those parts are working in a normative way. They're not overworking. But when we are under stress, the anterior cingulate, if you see, it says maltreated, but translating it to our daily lives, when we are under prolonged stress, it's the same thing. Our anterior cingulate is unable to filter. So it's it's more porous. It's letting in everything. And then that overwhelms the brain. So what we start to do is we lose perspective because we start to overthink and we start to worry, how can I handle this? What are other people thinking of me? Am I doing the right thing? So we start to overthink and worry and we lose perspective. How does stress affect our brain function? Now here we go back to the upside down triangle that Yuvraj was talking about, which was developed by Dr. Bruce Perry. Another way to represent it is using your hands. The base of the triangle is the top, the lower part is the bottom. And what we see here is the color draining out from the top as the color in the lower part increases. So as your stress response switches on, your top brain starts to shut down. And this is exactly why almost all of us know what we have to do. We know what we need to think, but in that moment of trigger, it is hard to do it. That is why often telling people things works only so much. Because if your stress brain is going to become more activated and shut down, then everything you learned is going to be locked up in your cortex, which has become inaccessible. So talking is not going to work always. Talking therapy is also not a good place to start, because even if you're like this with your therapist in your room and you learn everything you need to learn, in the moment when you need to use it, your brain goes into that state. You can't use everything that you learned there. So working with the brain, using the other parts of the brain, shoring up the foundation before going to the top, that's really, really. This is exactly the stuff, the upside down triangles, but it just shows how our brain areas are shutting down one by one. In calm states, your neocortex, that is a folded in part of your brain, is still working. And then when you're in arousal state, that is kind of shut down. We go into more concrete thinking. When we are in arousal state, an example would be you're sitting doing an examination in an examination hall. So you're not very creative, you're focused. Or you're driving on the road, you're focused. Or at least I hope that you will be. And, how many of us have come out of an exam hall and said, oh my God, how did I get this wrong? How did I miss this? You know why? Because this was your neocortex was shut down. You were very focused and it might have taken you a little bit further into the alarm state. So your brain was in partial shutdown. And that is why you missed it out. Something you knew very, very well. And which you know again the moment you step out of the exam hall. Yeah. So in alarm and fear states, in alarm states, we could go into a mode of either resistance or compliance. When we are resistant, we are saying, no, I'm not going to do this. Our voice may raise up and we may get angry, irritable. When we are compliance, we're just saying, I just want you to leave me alone. I will say yes to anything. I will nod my head. It's just bouncing off here. And then in extremes, there can be, if we do not come back to calm and arousal and get pushed into extremes, there can be fights, there can be physical fights, there can be objects that are broken, property damage, and there can be, if we are in the dissociative continuum extremes, there can be fainting, tiredness. This is about speech. There are two main speech centers in our brain. One is a little bit lower down, one is a little bit higher up near the cortex. And like I was saying, as the stress response starts to activate, your cortex starts to shut down. So that means we first lose the speech center that is closer to the cortex. If you think about speech as food, this part of the speech center is what is plating the food. It is helping us to bring out only the good stuff. This part is the raw materials. So it's very verbose, very fluid, but it's unfiltered. So when you're partially shut down, you may have people swearing, saying things they wouldn't otherwise say, and that is because of the partial shutdown of the brain. When the brain is completely shut down, you'll find that it's really hard to talk. And at that point, it's completely useless to say, use your words. Why aren't you talking to me? Because they've lost the ability to do that. Perception of time is also distorted. The top outer part of our brain is what helps us to have a sense of time. Yesterday was yesterday, today is today, tomorrow is tomorrow. It kind of, when this stress affects us and that starts to shut down, everything merges. That is why our brain starts to react in the present as if we were going through something that happened in the past. We can also lose a sense of time, as in 10 minutes might feel like an hour, or an hour might feel much lesser. The sense of time is very distorted. It affects families. When it affects people, it's bound to affect families. It is bound to affect relationships. Whether it is parent-child relationship or spouses or friends, it will affect relationships because we are social beings. We are interconnected. We affect each other. So when we are communicating with each other, this is something I spoke about in the last one as well, but I think it's really important to understand the mechanism of how we connect with each other. If we are all in calm states, this is the best way to connect. Both parties, the speaker and the listener, are calm. Both parties have full control of their whole brain function. So what one party says is interpreted almost as is by the other person. We interpret things with our own experience, with our own history. The closest interpretation is when we are both in the same state of mind. When one person is calm and the other person is kind of starting to shut down, it's tricky. When you see that happening, in your communication with someone, it might be in your office, it might be in your home, pull back. Allow the other person to regulate. Help them to come back to the neocortex. Typically can happen if we are in an argument or if we are having discussions or debates which are with polarized views. So if you feel that someone is shutting down, pull back, help them to regulate, and then go and deal with it if it is necessary. Because very often people have arguments, and a week later or a month later, they just know they had an argument which had a very bad fallout, but they can't often remember what they argued about. So go back to what is essential, not everything else. When two people are trying to communicate and both are heightened, this is going into a sure recipe for disaster. In this, you can have people yelling and screaming at each other. Yeah. And here it's probably fist fights, breaking plates, or God knows whatever else is happening. And that is state of mind. That is state of mind. If two people are to communicate like this state of mind in New Zealand, there's almost certainly one not going to be called. Yeah. So that is the level. And it all goes down to our variable changing brain function, which can actually be brought back. Yeah. So if we are sensitive to our own selves and to each other, we can learn how to communicate in a more effective way without triggering each other. That is the thing, whether it is parents trying to implement boundaries or staff, colleagues, supervisor, superior relationship. We can only push people to the limits of tolerance before we trigger them. The moment we trigger them, we become noise, not words. We are thinking we are saying intelligible words that should be making a difference in people's lives. But no, we've stopped becoming words. We've become symbols of distress, not symbols of healing. And words just become noise. So if you don't want your words to be noise, the person who's listening has to be in that state. All right. So what we are going to do now in the second half is learn some techniques on how we can regulate the brain. And I'll also talk a little bit about the theories behind them. Now, we kind of went over this a little bit, in the first half, the top part of the brain, how that is the brake, and the lower brain is the accelerator. So we can use the brake to control the accelerator if we have strong enough brakes and an accelerator that's not overloaded, right? There are some techniques for this. And then there are techniques which are to tune your accelerator. And usually what I find works best is use a combination and make it your lifestyle, because your brain rewires by repetition. It does not rewire by random experiences. So what you've really got to do is weave these things into your everyday life. And that will start helping your brain to make new connections, form new neurons and new networks. Change is possible. When I went to medical college first, I think it was 35 years ago now. Oh my God, I feel ancient. But when I first went to medical school, we were taught that by the time you're 2 years old, most of your brain development is done and dusted. But now we know the brain is plastic. And at any age, you have the ability to change your brain. It may be a little bit longer and a little bit more difficult, but change is possible because your brain is plastic. If you learn a new word when you're 80, you are changing your brain. If you learn a music instrument when you are 60, you are changing your brain. You're changing networks. So your brain is plastic. And then we come to the bottom-up approach. That is how we tune the accelerator. So managing stress daily keeps your baseline lower. You see, if our baseline stress is sitting up, then we are going to either escalate or go down very much more easily. But if our baseline stress is lower, we have what is called a higher window of tolerance. I'm not going into that topic today. That's another topic in itself. But we have to remain within the window that we can tolerate without getting triggered either way. So top down, prefrontal cortex. Many of us are used to these things. There are some novel things which I'm going to briefly discuss. Meditation, prayer, whichever one that you use, it is useful. There are actually functional MRI scans that show changes in the way the brain is perfused. The blood flow goes to your brain in different parts when you spend that morning time in stillness and quiet. I think the difference between meditation and prayer, and there is a difference in the functional brain scans. For those who use meditation, it's emptying yourself and being aware, conscious of the present. It's kind of a transcendental experience. The blood flow to your lateral part of your parietal cortex is decreased. So you have a sense of expanded time, expanded space. Prayer, the slight difference between that is you are emptying yourself and allowing a higher power to fill you. And that would also show in the functional MRI scans. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is being in the moment, being present. The first thing I'm going to do is, you may know this already, but I'm going to take you through a breathing exercise, which can be really relaxing. What I'm going to do is ask you to breathe in slowly through your nose. I will be using my fingers to guide you. As you breathe in, count to 4 slowly, not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 1, 2, 3, 4. And then hold your breath, counting to 2. And then I will ask you to breathe out through your mouth, counting to 4 slowly. We will do that 3 times, and then you will see how it feels. When you breathe in through your nose, what I'd encourage you to do is not, fill your chest, but let the breath go down to your tongue. So when you breathe in through your nose, you're actually going to close your esophagus. So you're not filling your stomach, but you're just going to push your diaphragm down. Yeah. So breathe in through your nose, counting to 4. Hold your breath. Breathe out slowly through your mouth, counting to 4. Let the stress go. Breathe in through your nose. Hold. Out through your mouth. Let the tension go. Breathe in through your nose. Hold. Out through your mouth. Let the stress go. Now, notice 3 things that you see around you. Notice 3 things you can hear. How are you feeling? The next one, we're going to use this and use our muscles. That's called progressive muscle relaxation. Now, the idea is if you have many tools in your kitty, you may like some tools to pick out of them. And also, you may like some tools at some times. And you will know what you want to use at each time in your life. In progressive muscle relaxation, I'm not going to take you through the whole of it, but through some of it. I'm going to ask you to start tightening groups of muscles as you breathe in. And then hold. When we breathe out, I'm going to ask you to relax and let go. Yeah. So we'll start with our hands. Tighten your hands. Make a firm fist as you breathe in through your nose. Hold. Out through your mouth and open your fist. Relax. One more time, just your fist. Tighten your fist. Breathe in. Breathe out through your mouth. Let go. Tighten your fist again. Breathe in. Out through your mouth. I'm going to ask you to tighten your forearms. Tighten your forearms. Breathe in. Tighten your forearms. Breathe in. Relax and let go. One more time. Tighten your forearms. Breathe in. Relax and let go. Tighten your whole arm down. Breathe in. Relax. Tighten your whole arm. Relax. One more time. Tighten your whole arm. Breathe in through your nose. Relax. Breathe out through your mouth. Tighten your back, your shoulders. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe in through your nose, tighten your back. Relax. One more time. Tighten your back, breathe in through your nose. Relax, let go. Now you can do this, tightening your tummy, tightening your thighs, your legs, your ankles. So you can do this for all your muscle groups one by one. At the end of it, your body would have relaxed. The next thing is visualization. How many of you would just love to be in a beautiful space? This is a beautiful setting, isn't it? It's a beautiful setting. I love it. And how many of you love to be in a nice, beautiful beach or a park, somewhere where, you know, everything is beautiful and gorgeous to the eyes when you're stressed to feel calm? You're all like that. And that's visualization. Take yourself in your mind to a beautiful place where you feel calm. Just notice that. Notice the beauty around you. Slightly different. Come back to the room. Slightly different. We are going to do what is called guided imagery. So I'm going to walk you through the visualization, guiding you through it. Shall we all go to a beach? Yeah. Everybody okay for a beach, or anyone wants a park or a hillside? Beach is fine? Yes. Let's go to the beach. And if you are a swimmer, you can go swim or you can go kayaking. Yeah. You can close your eyes. Take yourself to the beach. It's beautiful. It's warm. It's a sunny day. Notice how you feel, your bare feet, the sand under your feet. Notice the wind. Notice the seagulls, the sounds of the waves. Walk into the water. Notice the waves splashing against your feet as you go in. Notice the foam. Walk into the water. See if you can just float on the waves. Let the waves gently carry you up and down. You're bobbing on the waves. It's holding you, it's carrying you. Notice how it feels, the temperature of the waves. Notice the sky above you. Notice the wind. Notice the warm sun rays on your face. Notice any sounds. Maybe there's a trees there. feel it. Feel the sensations on your body. Feel calm. Now you can come back to the room. How's that? Yeah, that is guided imagery. And you know, you can guide yourself too, or you can listen to some apps. There are apps which teach you progressive, which can give you the soundtrack for progressive muscle relaxation and for guided imagery. You can use them. Now we're going to something special. And I'm really glad that we have the ones who created it here in our midst. It's called Your Hidden Mind. I do not have their website, but if you Google Your Hidden Mind, you will go to their website. This was developed by Brian and Christine, and it's been further developed by their daughter, Gwenda. Their son is also involved. Brian and Christine, can you please just stand up so that we can acknowledge you? They are our own Kiwis who have developed this amazing technique. I really wish I had learned it before today's session, then I could have dwelt more on it. But they've developed this method called Your Hidden Mind, where they use words. You showed it to us one day on Zoom. The words, tell me if I'm wrong, the words, when you see the sheet, something leaps at you. And then you use that to do the work that you do. I'm not exactly sure how you do it, because do you want to say a couple of words about it?
Are we able to connect Gwenda? Because Gwenda's one. Okay, well, I think she was.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pull it as a surprise on you, but I thought you might be able to explain it better.
Okay. Your hidden mind. Cool.
Dorothy has got a mic for you.
Your hidden mind is a tool, and over the last 25 years, we've developed this tool because we realized all that you were saying, and we also realized how limited each practitioner, each coach, each person is in reaching people on a larger scale. And mental health issues have done nothing but grow. How could we come up with something that enabled you to help more people on a core level? So we developed this tool called Your Hidden Mind.
That's what we found. People would come to us and work with us and find get results and be really pleased. We'd give them the tool to go away, and they'd say, but it doesn't work nearly as well when I do it myself. I need to work with somebody. We felt that there needed to be a way where you could work with yourself, because there are times when you can't have your coach or your therapist in your back pocket, you know, and you need some tool to help you. Sorry, you need a tool to help you at times. Okay, so you don't have. So we did a whole lot of study, and we came up with what we consider this tool, our Your Hidden Mind. Okay, and it's a series. It's 1,000.
There's 1,356 things that you can access. And the key is to take you
Out of
and
your conscious
and
into
your
your
subconscious by not thinking about what your problem is. Most of us, if we've got a problem, we go and try and source information based on what we think our problem is. Unfortunately, what we think our problem is normally not the core of the problem. So this system, you access it by just selection personally through a number, nothing else. You just select a number and something comes onto the screen. It's audio or written, and there will be words in there that will take you individually down your life journey, as you were saying in your pictures here, right down to when things impacted you at your core stage that you cannot consciously find. No matter how hard you try, you cannot find that moment when you were in the womb
And you were
But
impacted.
this system works that way. It's very difficult to explain.
Yes,
because
yes.
It's very complicated.
But thank you, thank
We're
you.
working with the
I think-
university at the
Yeah.
present,
Yeah.
doing research on it.
AUT,
Yeah.
the neuroscience department are doing a project to study it, but it takes you beyond your conscious thought and it opens up your subconscious thought and enables you to see whatever the thing is with a different or new perspective. And that way it lowers the intensity that was attached to the original moment or trigger.
Yeah.
Okay, the core, it lowers the intensity because you see it with a new perspective, and that gives you
So your future behavior then comes up at a different level of intensity. The most obvious thing is when people's anger disappears.
Yeah.
Because forever I got angry if somebody pointed a finger at me, right? But slowly you've discovered that when somebody does something, you can no longer be the angry person. So it's not a process that you will even recognize that the changes are happening until your triggers are challenged. And you suddenly discover, I used to get really angry when somebody used that word or that look or that tone, and all of a sudden you're no longer doing it. So this impacts the whole family. It means everybody in the family gets a benefit, even if only one person's doing it. That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now,
it's a good way.
Is that all you're gonna tell us?
for today, there's a lot more we have to go through.
She
So-
was a 47-year smoker and didn't even realize she had stopped smoking until somebody asked her to come and have a cigarette one day.
It's
That-
very
That's, there you go.
You can talk to Brian and Christine after session. They'll be, yeah, we'll have time. No problem, but thank you very much. Now, I met Brian and Christine through LinkedIn when and they were interested because I had done this series for stuff, an interview for stuff, where I was saying talking therapies don't always help because your cortex shuts down. And they caught on to that and connected with me through LinkedIn. So that's kind of how we know. So we met only once. That's why I was saying I wish I had had time to train in what they have developed. The story is Brian is a veteran and he had tried many different techniques for himself, for his own recovery, which did not help. And that is how he developed this, and Gwenda noticed that what he was doing was working for him and further shaped it. And now the whole family has been involved in this. So let's give them a big hand. And look up their website. If you Google Your Hidden Mind, you should come up with their website.
One word, yourhiddenmind.com.
yourhiddenmind.com. What really stood out for me is that they said, this is something the person can take with them and do it on their own, even in the absence of a therapist. So it's easily, it's something that can be rolled out very easily and can be helpful for a much larger scale of population. So that's wonderful. That's amazing. And I'm hoping this is the kind of inventions and development that we'll see in future, that we will no longer be holding on only to things that are talking and then expecting people to change and blaming them for not changing, but we'll actually go into the basics of brain development. Now, CBT is quite highly researched cognitive behavioral therapy. The problem with CBT is that your cognition, the C part, is very likely to be shut down when you really need to use it, right? If your brain is shutting down slowly, you still have ability to use the techniques you learn. But if it's shutting down real quick and you have a panic attack, well, you can't really think and stop a panic attack. It goes well beyond you. It's your HP axis that we talked about before. So that is when it may not work. But the behavioral part of it can be quite helpful. Bottom-up strategies. Bottom-up strategies are working with the lower brain. Now, the lower brain cannot reason. The lower brain cannot make any logic. The lower brain cannot tell time. So it's a waste of trying those kind of techniques with the lower brain. But the lower brain understands sensations. It understands movement. It understands rhythm. It understands connection. So use that, work with the brain. When we look at that combination, pattern, repetition, rhythm, relationships, sensory, movement, how many things do we have in our life that have that combination? Easy to get. Doesn't cost anything. We're going for a run. If you go for a run with someone, or if you're walking your dog, it becomes a relation. Right? If you're cooking a nice meal, yeah, you may have leftovers 3 days a week, but the other 4 days, maybe you cook a nice meal. Yeah, you're having all the sensations, the movement, the flavor, the colors, the smells of it. And then if you're cooking it and having a meal with someone, well, there's relationship. Gardening. Yeah, gardening. Somehow I feel it has that relational value, even if you're doing it on your own, because you are nurturing a plant. And you get the nurture back. You know, how good we feel when we see the first bud, the first leaf, the first fruit. Right? So simple things, everyday things, trampoline. Jumping on a trampoline, pattern, repetition. Yeah. Playing the drums. That's a really amazing thing, because I will come next to bilateral stimulation. So you're forcing, when you play drums, it's not only pattern, repetition, rhythm, but it is also bilateral stimulation. So if you think about this, there'll be a number of things that you can do easily, or you may already be doing easily. What I find is that people gravitate to things that heal them. It can be painting, it can be rowing, it can be, sports, music, art, anything. But people usually gravitate to things that heal them. When I ask people who've been struggling, what helped you? Very rarely do I hear things like CBT helped me, CBT changed my life. What I usually hear is this person changed my life. Or gardening, that changed my life. Or music, it changed my life. Sport, it changed my life. So those are the actual things. Why are our gyms so full? Has anyone thought about that? Where do people find the motivation to go and regularly use the gym? What are they doing? They are not just building their muscles. They're not just toning their body. They are regulating themselves. They are regulating themselves with others. That's why our gyms are full. We wouldn't do that if it wasn't calming our distress. Something inside of us becomes calm. Managing stress in the moment, daily activities is important, but we are human. We must remember that. And in the moment, we will need stuff that we will need to use some techniques to regulate. Now, we all went and had a nice warm cup of tea in the break. Yeah. Someone had very kindly promised baking, and I saw that they brought it in. Now, they left it in the kitchen. We'll have it after this. But when we had a cup of tea, you held that warm cup in your hand. How did it feel? Nice. So you know what? During your day, if you need to, keep a flask with you. Pour into it a warm or cold fluid, something with a temperature difference that appeals to you. If it is cold, put some ice cubes into it. And then keep sipping from it. In the moment, if you're taking a cold drink with ice cubes in it, and you feel that you're starting to get, something is starting to trigger you, you're starting to feel some agitation, some disturbance, you could not only sip it, but you can take the ice cubes in your hand Take a cube in your hand quietly. Nobody needs to know. Put it to your face. Yeah. Hold it in your hand. That temperature is going to work on the lower part of your brain. And in the moment, it can bring it on. It's not going to cure the ills of life. But in the moment, it's a strategy that can help bring it down. Washing your face, splashing your face with cold water. Yeah. Having a shower, a bath. Or sometimes for panic attacks, you could just fill a bowl with ice and dunk your face in a bowl of ice. That can help you. It's a very big, immediate thing to bring it down. When you're studying, my suggestion is usually don't sit down for more than what you can concentrate. Everybody's concentration period will be different. And I don't think most people can concentrate more than 45 minutes. But if you are starting to space out, if your mind is going to wander in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, take a quick break, get out of your seat, go wash your face with water, go for a walk, come back. Your brain was shutting down, it'll be open. So when your brain is in this state, you're going to take much longer to absorb anything from your book, and you may not absorb it well. But if you bring your brain back to this state by taking a 2-minute break, then you're going to absorb stuff quicker. You will make up for the 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and you will absorb it more appropriately. Since we've got, so I've got some of this stuff. I hope the people on Zoom can see this too. I'll pass these around. You can put them on your hand and smell them. Yeah, I'll pass 2 around here, 2 around here. We can, the names are there. See how you feel when you smell them. You can put them on your hand. You can try all of them. You don't have to try the ones you don't like. I'm just watching how different people react to different scents. Some are going, ooh, some are going, lovely. It elicits a response. I'm going to pass the stuff around. Try them. Oh. That was quite a response. All right, you can try them. Yeah. We can pass this around. That's kinetic sand inside. That's all right. You got it? Yeah. You like it? For people who like a bit of art, these are scented. I'll pass this around too. You can draw, these are washable and scented. You can draw with them on your hand and smell them. That's kinetic sand. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, it's squishy. It's squishy. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. The Zoom people are missing out. So the scents we passed around, this is orange. I know we had lavender and probably lemon. Eucalyptus, peppermint. I just picked them up from Kmart. They are the cheapest in Kmart. But they are there in many stores. You can have scents, you can have scented candles. There are many ways you can use scents. And the other things I passed around were these little squishy toys. They are there in $2 shops, good stuff shops, farmers. You can get them in many different places. Yes, they are sensations, and also some of them come with lights and sound. So different ways to stimulate. Yeah, I will show them. Yeah, this is one of those. This is different. Oh yeah, I'm in the showing for the people on Zoom. Another thing I passed around, yes, after you've shown that, was kinetic sand. Kinetic sand, it's a bit like this. It's just squishy. Some people like the feel. There are many other sensory stuff. If you go to the shops and just look around, you'll find many different things. And something will be specific for you and you can pick it up if you like to. Now, bear hugs. You know, when some people like touch, some people dislike touch. And that again goes back to our history. If as infants, we have a history of being touched, hugged, caressed, right from the get-go, we will be comfortable with nurturing touch. But if as infants, we had a lack of that, or if we had painful touch, then we will be uncomfortable with touch. So it can happen when there is neglect and when there is traumatic, abusive stuff. Neglect can sometimes be inadvertent when a person is in an ICU setup. Even though everybody may have love for them, they can't actually go into the incubator and hug them. And that is where the kangaroo mother studies have shown it can make a kangaroo, I think. My Indian accent is coming to play here. Yeah. Kangaroo mother experiments have shown that holding your baby inside of you, skin to skin, for at least some periods of time when your baby is in NICU can make a big difference to your baby's outcomes. And there are ICUs, intensive care units, that are using that now. Bear hugs. So this is kind of where I wanted to get to next when I was talking about touch. When you are uncomfortable with touch, start with small amounts, allowing somebody who you trust to touch you in safe places. And initially, you may want to guide their hand. It might be just touching your hand. But when you use touch, use it firm, not light. Because firm touch will activate what we call proprioceptors in your brain that can take back signaling, positive signaling to your brain. So always when you hug someone, firm, that is what is connecting and helping. Light touch, light hugs are not going to help you very much. In that vein, when a firm hug or firm touch is maybe not possible to get, or you don't like it, then you could use a weighted blanket or a weighted cushion. This is a weighted cushion. Can people on Zoom see? This cushion is saying hello to you. Now, all I did was go to the store and buy a toy which had a zip. And then I opened the zip and took out a lot of the fluff. There's still some fluff in there. And then I put in rice. You can fill it with rice, you can fill it with beet sand. If I show more, it might spill. So I'm just going to put it back there. I'll pass this around. Just put it on your lap and see how you feel. This is a weighted cushion. Easily, you can easily make it and have one. You can do it today if you have one like this at home. You can use a cushion cover as well. You put it in your lap. Yes. Nice. Now this is yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. I'm gonna pass this weighted blanket around. Yeah. It's a little bit heavy, so you may have to get up and pass it, or you may need help. Yes. Just put that on. You can put it on your lap. You can put it across your shoulder, any which way. Just put it and let it be there for a minute. You can wrap it around and then see how you go. Take a minute under it. Ideally, a weighted blanket should be less than 10% of your body weight. And if some people use it when they're not lying in bed, some people also use it for sleep. It can improve your quality of sleep. So there are thermoregulated weighted blankets, which you can use in any season. If you use it for sleep, you have to make sure that it's under your arm level so that it doesn't block your breathing. Less than 10% of your body weight so that you can push it out if it's too heavy. Yeah. So we'll get these things fast. And then rocking. Rocking chair, swings, higher swings. How much we love those things as kids. But you know, it wasn't just fun, it was actually helping your brain. So those things can all be very nice. I apologize to the people on Zoom, but you should really go and try a weighted cushion. You can make it really easily. Yeah. And some people may have gym balls or Pilates ball. Yeah. You know, you can use it in many different ways. You can sit on it and let it bounce. There's a little gentle bounce rhythm. Quite nice. And then you can roll on it on your tummy. When you roll on it on your tummy, you're using your pressure points as well. So it can be quite nice, quite regulating. Or you can lie and have somebody roll it over you. Yeah. So you can use a gym ball, Pilates ball in many different ways. Yeah. They're easy to get. And then push-ups, pull-ups. You can do that. You can do it against a chair, against a wall, on the floor. Yeah. Those things, those isometric exercises are quite good. They increase body awareness. They decrease dissociation. Dissociation is when you're less body aware. You're forcing your body, your brain to be more aware. Things like this, hula hoop. I can't demonstrate it. I'm sorry. I'm really not good at it. Can't even try. Yeah. Something like this. Or maybe aerobics. Those are things which make you boxing. They make you more body aware. So those are some other good strategies as well. Go on to the next one. Now with mindfulness, I was wondering why I had the grapes. I'm going to pass out the grapes. One more thing before we finish. Going back to the mindfulness strategy. Take some grapes in your hands. We'll pass it around. And eat them when I ask you to. I'll take you through it. Wait for it. Wait for it. There is more. There's enough for everybody. So in case you eat one, just take two or more. There's enough. There's plenty. Yeah, we can just pass it around. Thank you. Now, this is another mindfulness strategy. You know, we did mindful breathing. Yeah, the scented coloring that is washable. You can just paint something on your hand and smell it and wash it off. We did mindful breathing. We did progressive muscle relaxation. Now, what we are going to do is mindful eating. So take the grapes. Everybody take as many as you want. Yeah, everybody got one. People on Zoom, you could choose something from your fridge or your kitchen. Pick up something that you could eat now. Hold it in your hand. I will take one to demonstrate. I'll take one to demonstrate, and then we can discuss. We have more. Anybody who wants more, just let me know. I'll bring it along. Hold it in your hand. Notice how it feels. It's cold. Notice how it looks. Look at it as if you just picked up something that fell from Mars. As if you've never seen a grape before. Notice how it feels in your hands when your fingers are holding it. Take it to your mouth, put it on your lips. Notice how your lips feel. Bite into it. Slowly. Notice the juice, the taste, temperature. Slowly chew it, relish it. Have you ever tasted grapes so good? That's mindful eating. Yeah. There's more mindful eating here. Now we'll go to interhemispheric connections. See, this is important because one of the things that our brain does when it responds to stress is it lateralizes. It preferentially shuts down the left part of your brain more. That's the logic part of your brain more, and activates the right part of your brain more. So what you really want to do is make both brain communicate with each other, reconnect. That is where bilateral stimulation comes in. One of the treatments that has been devised using bilateral stimulation and highly researched is EMDR therapy. I can talk to it because I trained in it about a year ago. My only regret is I wish I had trained in it much earlier. And maybe when I learn your strategy, I might say that too. Yeah, there is another thing called brain spotting, which I've heard about, but I haven't really trained in it either. I can talk to you about EMDR though. So what happens in EMDR is each of us, we've gone through many different experiences right from the get-go. It's stored in our body either as verbal memories or as emotional memories or physical memories. Usually it's a combination of everything. Your verbal memories will always have a physical and emotional component. What may not happen is that you have a physical memory and you don't have verbal recall, because it happened very early in life at a time when you did not have words, right? For example, there's a study that they did called the still face experiment, which I've shown in one of my earlier seminars. In that, they asked the mother to not respond to a 1-year-old for 2 minutes. And in that 2 minutes, the stress the 1-year-old experiences is phenomenal. I mean, we look at that picture, that video, and we get stressed ourselves. Oh, the poor kid. Now, what happened was they were doing these experiments, and there was a psychologist who brought her little boy in for that experiment, and they did it in a particular room. They were measuring his heart rate. He was around 1, I think, toddler. And his heart rate went up in the 2 minutes that his mom did not respond. And then, because his mom worked in that space, well, when she responded again, it regulated, but he didn't like to go into that particular room after that experience. And as he grew older, his mom was working there. They found that every time he goes into that room, his heart rate goes up. See, it happened once, but he was constantly being exposed back again to that memory that his body had. And his heart rate would go up. As he grew older, he would say he doesn't like the room. And when they ask why, he might say, I don't like the color. I don't like the furniture. Can't put a finger on it, why he doesn't like it. But people who know the story knew what happened. So that's kind of how we carry memories with us. And then we try to explain things that we like or dislike, we can do or can't do. But sometimes you see the explanation may not be in our verbal record. Also, there may have been big things that have happened in our lives, but it might be a component, a small component of the big thing that actually caused the biggest disturbance to us. It might have been that we failed an exam. It's a big deal, right? But what caused the biggest disturbance? The look in my father's face, or the look in somebody's face. And that is what would have elicited the response in your body. Oh. And that is the response that has to heal for you to recover. So what we do in EMDR is your brain knows the stuff. See, we are literally scratching the surface of knowledge about the brain. We are probably using less than 5% of the potential of our brain. There's a lot more potential locked. Your brain knows what to do. So what we do is, there are little muscles that move our eyes, and these muscles come from deep inside our brain. And like I said, the 86 billion neurons are networked. They don't work in silos. So when we move our eyes, we start to activate different networks. Networks that are related to memories, networks that are related to emotions, networks that are related to self-reflection and body feelings. And then our brain takes us through a journey where it sifts out the things that we need. It can make the memory come alive again. Yeah. And sometimes there are people who say, it's like it's happening again. And sometimes people can be very emotional. They could cry, they could be angry. It's like a wave. It can become intense, but after that, your brain deals with it. And sometimes things that you didn't even realize you held in your mind may come up. But often people fear, oh my God, that's a can of worms. I don't want to dig that can of worms. So I'd rather live with my trauma than go through therapy. But actually, the can of worms doesn't all get opened and emptied. Your brain knows what to do. It just pulls out what it needs, and then it deals with it. And then you de-escalate, you come down. Once your brain has dealt with it, it's dealt with it for good. That will not come back to bother you again. Like how you were saying, the triggers go. The triggers are gone. So when the triggers are gone, even if you try, it's not going to affect you again, that thing or whatever was related to that. It takes a few sessions, but then it does happen. And sometimes when you're doing EMDR therapy, ways to explain it is, instead of the stuff being constantly in your face, it goes to the side so that you can move forward. Yeah. Sometimes the memory just disintegrates, but oftentimes it neutralizes and it doesn't bother you anymore. So how do you do EMDR? Many people have been curious about EMDR. I was myself too, when I went to train. And I went as a cynic. I was thinking, how is this going to make any change, make any difference? But as part of my training, I had to undergo EMDR myself. And that is when I discovered the power of EMDR. That was phenomenal. It was amazing. And now it's become the main part of my practice. And I've used this to decrease the medication that people need. So my prescribing has become a lot cleaner, very minimal. And my goal is now that even if I put somebody on medication, work with them till they can thrive off medication. It is possible for this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not talking about things like psychosis of different causes. That's a different category altogether. But I'm talking about things that happen to your brain that you need to heal from because of life experiences. That can be depression, that can be anxiety, that can often be classified into groups of symptoms like ADHD. Sometimes I've also seen symptoms of autism go away because very often it can have relational component. There may not have been adequate relational work early on in life. So it's hard to feel sensations. It's hard to be regulated. It is hard to connect. It's hard to give eye contact. But as we repair that with EMDR, you can see them go away. So actually, the beautiful thing is neurodiverse disorders can be treated. And people can thrive off medication. Yeah, I've seen it happen. So I use this, I use it often in combination with art for those who like it, or I use it in combination with, you got a question, yeah, come to it, with sand play, sand tray. I've got a sand tray. So use it in combination, that helps too. It was developed by Francine Shapiro. She used eye movements. Eye movements still give you the best results. So I use eye movements, but you can do bilateral tapping. You can do, they have some devices which you can hold or put on your arms that give vibrations when you're talking through stuff. And this is another interesting thing about EMDR is you can maintain confidentiality. See, you don't have to talk and tell your therapist everything. But your therapist will do a set of eye movements. It's very protocolized. And then stop. And every 20 to 30 or 40 cycles, the therapist will stop and say, let it go, take a breath. What are you noticing now? And when we say, what are you noticing now? It's also a cue to your brain to notice thoughts, to notice emotions, to notice body feelings. And as your brain starts to notice, it will process it and then let go. So sometimes you may want to say things and you may be comfortable saying things, what you're noticing. Sometimes people aren't. So they'll just notice and say, okay. And I have done a handful of sessions with people who didn't want to disclose anything. I did not even know what they were processing. I just took them through the eye movements and I told them, tell me when it gets intense. Tell me if it gets overwhelming. I'll need to de-escalate you. I watch out for their facial expressions, their body language, and then take cues from that, and then de-escalate. And then, so we have a scale. Those are the 8 phases of EMDR. First, you take a history assessment. Preparation was something that people put a lot of stress on, but EMDR is continuously being researched and refined. There are different approaches from the US and different approaches from Europe. The European countries are focusing more on getting into the processing stage quickly, even in your first session. And that is what has been my approach. I don't spend too much time on preparation. Get a history because something is there that's triggering, and we need that stuff processed to get through the triggers. The lesser we wait, the quicker the relief. That's the logic. So just jump very quickly into desensitization. And then your brain, it's like a journey on a train, you know. Your brain throws out the stuff it doesn't need, and stuff that it needs will come in and take its place. So we take people, we ask them, how much disturbance do you feel when you think about it? You could tell me the memory, And if you told me the memory, then I asked, how much disturbance do you feel when you think about what your father told you, or your mom using alcohol and coming back home intoxicated, and you had to help her into bed? How much disturbance are you feeling when you go back to that memory? And they may say 7, 8, 10. And then we go through the I moments. And I will also ask them, what do you want to feel instead of the disturbance? For some people, it might be something as simple as it is over. I'm safe now. For some people, it might be, I just want to feel calm. For some people, it might be, I want to forgive. I want to feel forgiveness. I want to feel compassion. So then I have another scale. There is another scale of 1 to 7. When we ask, how much compassion are you able to feel now when you hold that memory in one hand? And then you use the words compassion. How much can you feel? So some people may say, nothing, that's a 1. Or 3. Then we do the eye movements. And then they ask, how much compassion do you feel now when you're holding that memory in one hand? And the words compassion. It keeps on increasing. So we keep doing the eye movement sets till it becomes full. Maximum is 7. And once we get to the maximum, then I ask, how much disturbance do you feel? So by then, from 8 or 7 or 10, it might have, usually it will come down to 3 or 4. And then we ask, what is stopping it from becoming a 0? And then we go through eye movements again till it becomes 0. And then we ask, what are you feeling in your body now when that memory comes up? By the time, and then we work through the sets till the body feelings are also gone. Some people say, I feel it in my head, the stress. Some people say there's pain, my shoulders. There's a heaviness in my heart, or I can feel my tummy sink. Many things, many different things. And then it all settles down. So EMDR can be, at first people used to think it's useful only for people with severe PTSD. But no, it's used for a wide variety of mental health conditions. It works. I've used it for all the stuff. Phobias works really well. Sleep disturbances, pain, eating disorder, OCD, addictions, because addictions are usually, they come from somewhere. They come from a person trying to regulate their body physiology. And then you can add peer pressure and habit linked on, added on. But initially, it usually starts there. This is kind of how EMDR, well, these are some scans people have done to see how brain networks quieten down. This is very active areas in the brain, and then they become more quiet after EMDR. So this is another SPECT scan, pre and post. So you can see the change, very significant change. So now we are going to finish. Before we finish, I'll just take you through a procedure, a protocol that was developed as a group protocol. There is a group protocol that has been developed to address specific trauma incidents for a group or community, such as the cyclone. So if there were people affected by it in the room, what I would do is give you sheets of paper and just read out instructions. You don't have to say anything. And you just follow the instructions on the paper and move your hands, watching your hands with your eyes from as per the instruction, and your brain processes that particular episode. It wouldn't necessarily drop it down to a 0 disturbance, but from a 6, your disturbance might come to a 4 or a 3, so that your function improves. That group protocol has been trialed and researched successfully in both Ukraine and Russia, families affected by the war, and also healthcare professionals in the UK during COVID. And it's, there are a group of EMDR therapists who are trying to roll it out for those affected by Cyclone Gabrielle now recently. It can be done online as well. This is just the safe part of that group protocol. So I'm going to take you through the safe protocol, and then we can, I think we've kind of near the end, right? Neurofeedback and then the end, yeah. We can live in a very much better space, even good and calm. Yeah. Now, there are going to be two things I'm going to show in this. This is called gorilla taps. This and just, oh, sorry. I think my mic was going very high loud. Yeah. So gentle on the chest. That is gorilla taps. Butterfly hugs will be turn your hands toward you, lock your thumbs, put your hands on your chest, and just tap alternately. Yeah. That is butterfly taps. Yeah. Hands kind of pointing up. Yeah. Now we'll go through the whole protocol. Ideally, they ask you to have a kind of picture or something to look at so that you associate that with the protocol. And then if you keep doing it over and over, then next time you look at it, your brain automatically goes into a calm state. Yeah. It's called earth, air, water, light, and then bilateral tap. The earth, I'm going to take you through that. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Feel the chair you're sitting. They hold you, they support you. Feel your back resting on the chair. Breathe in slowly through your nose, like we did before, counting to 4. Right down to your belly. Hold. Breathe out slowly through your mouth, counting to 4. Breathe in slowly through your nose, counting to 4. Hold. Breathe out slowly through your mouth. Breathe in slowly through your nose, counting to 4. Hold. Breathe out slowly through your mouth. Now notice any dryness in your mouth. See if you can make more saliva. Our mouth gets dry when we are stressed, and we make more saliva when we relax. Imagine you're chewing on a lemon. Take 2 fingers and rub underneath your earlobes. And think of the taste of a lemon. Notice the saliva you make. Now take yourself to a safe place, a place where you love to be, calm, quiet, happy. It could be the beach, it could be a garden, it could be any place. If you want, take someone with you. It can be someone real, it can be someone imaginary. It can be a pet, it can be anything. As you feel the ground beneath your feet, the chair you're sitting on, breathing in slowly through your nose, out slowly through your mouth. Notice the saliva that you make. Join me in doing the butterfly tap. Go take your mind to the calm place. Butterfly or gorilla tap. Just keep tapping. Stay in your calm place. Notice the calm. Notice the peace. Tapping till you feel really good. Then you can come back to it. Now, if you remember this, You can use it anytime, any number of times during the day. Brings your stress down. And because it's bilateral, the tapping can be good to just do low levels of processing. Sometimes you may wake up in the middle of the night and you may have trouble falling asleep. Try fluid tapping. You're quite happy. Yeah. So that is the earth, air, water, light, butterfly taps. If you are going to practice this regularly 5-6 times a day, you can keep a wristband or a sticker or something that you look at and associate it with before you start. And when you finish, you can check your own distress level on a scale of 10 before you start and when you finish. And then your brain will start to relate that picture or that symbol to calming down. So sometimes you may just have to look at it to just quickly calm down. Yeah, so you can use it. This is the last one I was going to touch on today. It's called neurofeedback therapy. It's been there for many years, but it's not very widely used yet. And that's another thing that I partially trained in pre-COVID, and then I couldn't continue the training when COVID lockdown came down. Besides, the equipment is quite expensive too. What we do in neurofeedback therapy is you see those thingies on this young person's head. You put leads, EEG leads, to measure your brain waves. And then you use computer games or computer or movies to make your brain to stay within the wave frequency that you want it to be in a calm and present state without dissociating and without going into fight and flight. It's very interesting. Now, the reason it's probably not rolled out large scale is because probably my thinking is for trauma and stress, people are still refining the techniques. But where they have, and they have studied it, it's been found quite useful. However, unlike EMDR, with EMDR, the effect size after you stop treatment continues to grow. And studies have shown that at the end of a year, it's almost reaching 90% or cure level. It's not, the effect size does not go down after you stop, it goes up. But in neurofeedback, I'm not quite sure. Some studies have not shown that consistency, but however, it might be a good stepping way to give us a foot in the door to use other strategies, which are more long-term for people who are unable to engage first with something else. And many people would like a computer game. What happens is you set the settings in the computer that when your brain waves go beyond that setting, the game will freeze. So during my training, I tried this and the game just freezes. You can't move the blocks. So you're not using your hands. You're using your brain waves to make the computer game work. And you're using your brain waves to see the movie. And if your brainwave goes out of that window, the movie becomes from color, it becomes black and white. So your brain automatically goes into the wavelength, the frequency in which it is regulated to watch the movie or to play the game. So it's a very interesting way. It's a nice way to regulate your brain. That's another new thing that I'm hoping to train in. So with that, we come to the end.